canceling talks with Canada because of a television commercial. And it's not new. You might have seen it in the ball game a week ago. It's going to be back on TV tonight. This is an ad from Ontario, and it invokes the voice of Ronald Reagan, which already we've got everybody upset about this, certainly with the trade spat that's being had right now. It takes lines from a Ronald Reagan speech that was delivered on the radio, and if you haven't seen it yet, here's a taste.
Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Donald Trump on Truth Social. Canada cheated and got caught, he writes. They fraudulently took a big buy ad saying Ronald Reagan did not like tariffs, when actually he loved tariffs for our country and its national security. He says Canada's trying to illegally influence the U.S. Supreme Court with this ad in one of the most important rulings, he says, in the history of our country, saying that Canada has long cheated on tariffs, charging our farmers as much as 400%. Thank you to the Ronald Reagan Foundation, he says, for exposing this fraud, when in fact those are Ronald Reagan's words here. The ad, however, misrepresents, according to the statement, presidential radio address, and the government of Ontario did not seek or receive permission to use and edit the remarks. Indeed, they grabbed a couple of lines from the speech and stitched them together. But if you read that whole speech, you realize what he was actually doing was explaining his decision to add duties to semiconductors from Japan as a last resort, and explained why he did not like tariffs as opposed to loving them. Let's assemble our political panel and get their thoughts. I have a feeling that they'll have a few. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis with me here in Washington, Jeannie Shanzano in New York. Rick is Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Jeannie is democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Happy Friday. Great to see you both. People should know, if they don't already, Rick Davis actually worked in the Ronald Reagan White House. And as a Republican, I think we can start with Rick here, because I'm pretty sure that the word tariff was considered a swear word in Republican politics until Donald Trump came along. Rick, did Ronald Reagan love tariffs?
Ronald Reagan did not love tariffs. Ronald Reagan was a free trader. He was someone who really espoused the sort of power of open markets and free trade. And I think that it's really important for people to know that this, in the case of this radio address, which he used to announce certain kinds of policies, or describe the ones that his administration was giving, kind of the internet of the time. He was announcing a very sensitive issue that the administration spent a year working on, and that was a 301 case, an anti-dumping case against Japan. And he used existing laws to do that. He didn't go out and announce an economic state of emergency in order to sort of, bootstrap the congressional efforts. And by the way, and he had to work very hard with the Republicans on Capitol Hill to do this, because they were free traders and they didn't want us going into a trade war with Japan. But long story short, I mean, I think, Ontario got what they really wanted to, which was an enormous amount of publicity around this, sort of very inexpensive 30-second ad.
That's the truth. I heard a couple of people mention it just in the wild after it appeared in the ball game about a week ago. Jeannie, if that hadn't taken place today, to Rick's point, if the president hadn't been truthing about it, I don't suspect it would have been on front pages. We should also note that Ontario's Premier Doug Ford posted Reagan's full remarks, saying that Reagan knew that we are stronger together. Mark Carney said negotiators actually were making progress until this happened. So I'm wondering your thoughts on this, Jeannie, and if the editing in this ad did anything to change the meaning of Reagan's speech.
No, it didn't. And I'll tell you who I'm most concerned about is the Ronald Reagan Foundation, because to me, their statement read like sort of like a hostage video, like, oh, we're going to look into whether we can press charges and pursue this legally. But wink, wink, look at YouTube and see the actual speech, and you'll know that it doesn't destroy, it doesn't mess up anything that he said. Because Ronald Reagan's point was like most Republicans at the time, and quite frankly, many today, which is that after the 1930s, and the Smoot-Hawley tariffs and the destruction that did not just to the economy, but to the Republican Party politically, they have not been in favor of widespread tariffs. Ronald Reagan, like many Democrats and Republicans, support targeted tariffs for a specific reason at a specific point in time. But these broad, widespread tariffs that Donald Trump and William McKinley before him have pursued and were pursued with those protectionist acts in the early 1930s have been disastrous for the U.S. economy. So I think somebody needs to make sure that they go to the Ronald Reagan Foundation and make sure they're all okay, because it feels like there was some arm twisting there. You get out and make a statement, and then they nod into what's on YouTube, which is the reality that Donald Trump, like most Republicans, doesn't favor broad tariffs like Donald Trump does.
Jason Kenney, former premier of Alberta, on X calls it, quote, a direct replay of his radio address formatted for a 1-minute ad. Rick, what do you think about the editing here? President Trump has a history with this type of thing, calling out CBS, for instance, for editing remarks and trying to suggest that Canada was cheating here. Does it betray the spirit of what Reagan was trying to say?
I think a vast amount of advertising that's in the public policy or political domain does exactly what Doug Ford, the premier of Ontario, did, which is he took the meaning of the speech. He knows that Donald Trump or Ronald Reagan was a free trader, and he pulled the pieces out that that enunciated that. And so I think, again, a lot of smoke, no fire, right? I'm not sure Premier Carney appreciates the intervention of Doug Ford in the negotiations.
That's a whole other side of the story
with the White House. But Doug Ford's a very, I think, boisterous leader, and has gotten into a tiff with Donald Trump on more than one occasion. And I think this is a good example of how you can live inside of Donald Trump's head in a cheap 30-second. I shouldn't say cheap. It is baseball, but I think this is a lesson to other leaders.
Well, let's just stick on that for a minute, because you made a lot of political ads. Is this an effective 30-second ad?
Well, yes, because of the fact that they probably spent $100,000 to make and put it on, and it's now had $50 million worth of publicity. So I would say that is a very effective ad.
Free media. Let's do that. We've got sound of Carney here talking this morning about our trade relationship. Let's listen.
We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We recognize that that policy has fundamentally changed from the policy in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. And it's a situation where the United States has tariffs against every one of their trading partners to different degrees. A lot of progress has been made. And we stand ready to pick up on that progress and build on that progress when the Americans are ready to have those discussions.
I don't know when the Americans are going to be ready, Jeannie. He's going to be in Asia. He'll be at the APEC and ASEAN summits next week. Does Donald Trump have a little pull aside here? Does Carney have to demand the ad come off the air?
I don't know if they will speak. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. But what Carney is saying is absolutely right. They can't do anything to change Donald Trump's mind on this. They can't do anything to change U.S. policy. But what they can do is what so many allies are doing, which is working in the long term to protect themselves economically from the United States. And that is good for them and bad for the United States security, economy, long term. We have allies for a reason. We need their support, and we need it both economically and we need it from a security perspective. And all this broad spread tariff policy has done since it was announced is alienate the United States from its closest allies. And if there was a good sound reason the president could offer for the policy, it would make sense, but he, for Canada, goes for everything from fentanyl to immigration to raising money to returning manufacturing home. And so it is a confused policy. It is a president who apparently is up in the middle of the night, triggered by ads that are a week old. And this is no way to set sound policy. And doing it at a time he set it over to Asia. And also the Supreme Court is hearing a case on whether he has this power to set this policy to begin with. So at the front time for the tariff policy, and the president is making decisions that are not in the long-term best interest of the United States. That's clear. Ronald Reagan knew it, and Donald Trump should swallow that and learn the lesson.